In the gilded halls of Thornwick Palace, where centuries of tradition demanded silence and propriety above all else, Duchess Elena Whitmore had always been the picture of royal grace. Her composure was legendary, her diplomatic smile never faltering even in the most challenging situations. But on that crisp autumn morning, as she witnessed something that would shatter her carefully maintained world, Elena discovered that even the most controlled person has a breaking point. What she saw would not only destroy years of family peace, but would force her to choose between royal duty and a mother's fierce love. Sometimes, the most devastating storms begin with the smallest crack in the foundation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine gardens of Thornwick Palace as Duchess Elena Whitmore adjusted her pearl necklace and prepared for another day of royal obligations. At 34, she had mastered the art of royal composure, her every gesture calculated and graceful. Her marriage to Prince Alexander had thrust her into a world where appearances mattered more than feelings, where duty superseded personal desires, and where maintaining the family's reputation was paramount above all else. Elena's mornings typically began with a review of her schedule with her private secretary, followed by breakfast with her daughter, Princess Sophia, before the 8-year-old was whisked away to her private tutoring sessions. Today felt no different as she made her way through the marble corridors, her heels clicking softly against the polished floors. The palace had been buzzing with activity lately due to the upcoming state dinner, an event that would host dignitaries from across Europe. As the newest addition to the royal family, Elena felt the weight of proving herself worthy of the crown she wore. Every detail had to be perfect, every interaction carefully orchestrated to reflect the dignity and sophistication expected of the royal household. Her sister-in-law, Lady Victoria Ashford, had been particularly involved in the preparations. Victoria, 10 years Elena's senior, was the widow of Prince Alexander's older brother and had been living at the palace for the past 3 years since her husband's passing. She was a woman of sharp intelligence and even sharper tongue, known for her traditional views and her belief that the royal family needed to maintain strict standards in an increasingly casual world. Elena paused outside the breakfast room, hearing voices from within. She recognized her daughter Sophia's gentle tone mixed with Victoria's more authoritative voice. As she reached for the door handle, something in Victoria's tone made her hesitate. There was an edge to it, a coldness that seemed out of place for a conversation with a child. "Stand straighter, Sophia. Princesses don't slouch like common children." Victoria's voice cut through the air. "And that dress is entirely inappropriate. The hemline is too casual for someone of your station." Elena's hand froze on the door handle. Through the slightly ajar door, she could see her daughter standing in the center of the room, her small shoulders pulled back in an obvious attempt to please her aunt. Sophia's usual bright demeanor seemed dimmed, her eyes cast downward as Victoria circled her like a predator examining its prey. Furthermore, Victoria continued, her voice growing colder, "Your mother has been far too lenient with your education. In my day, royal children understood discipline and propriety. They didn't waste time with frivolous activities like painting and music. Those are distractions from your real duties." Elena felt her chest tighten. She had specifically encouraged Sophia's artistic interests, believing that creativity was essential for a well-rounded child. The little girl had shown remarkable talent in watercolors and had begged for piano lessons, which Elena had happily arranged. "I like painting, Aunt Victoria," Sophia said quietly, her voice barely audible through the door. "Mama says I'm getting better at drawing flowers." "Your mother," Victoria said with a dismissive wave of her hand, "is not from our world originally. She doesn't understand that royal children must focus on more important matters. Painting flowers is a waste of time that could be better spent learning languages or studying history." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The casual cruelty in Victoria's voice was shocking, but what hurt more was seeing how her daughter's small frame seemed to shrink with each harsh word. "Now," Victoria continued, moving closer to Sophia, "let's practice your curtsy again. And this time, do it properly. The way you did it yesterday at the charity luncheon was embarrassing. Everyone noticed how clumsy you were." Elena watched through the crack in the door as her 8-year-old daughter attempted a curtsy, her little legs trembling slightly from nerves. Sophia had always been somewhat shy in large gatherings, and Elena had been working gently with her to build confidence in social situations. "Pathetic," Victoria declared as Sophia completed her curtsy. "Again. And this time, don't look like you're about to cry. Royal children don't show weakness." Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She could see tears forming in Sophia's eyes, though her daughter was bravely trying to hold them back. The little girl attempted another curtsy, this one even more shaky than the first as her anxiety increased. "You're hopeless," Victoria sighed dramatically. "Perhaps if your mother had spent less time filling your head with artistic nonsense, and more time teaching you proper royal behavior, you wouldn't be such a disappointment." The word disappointment hit Elena like a physical blow. She watched as Sophia's lower lip began to tremble, and, despite her best efforts, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Tears." Victoria's voice turned even colder. "How utterly common. Royal children do not cry, especially not in front of others. Your behavior is a reflection on this family, and, right now, you're making us all look weak." Elena had heard enough. She pushed open the door and stepped into the room, her presence immediately commanding attention. Both Victoria and Sophia turned toward her, Victoria's expression showing a flash of surprise before quickly returning to her usual composed mask. "Good morning," Elena said, her voice carefully controlled despite the rage building inside her. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Elena," Victoria replied smoothly. "I was just working with Sophia on her deportment. The child needs considerable improvement before the state dinner." Elena moved swiftly to her daughter's side, placing a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder. She could feel the little girl trembling beneath her touch, and it took every ounce of her royal training to keep her voice steady. "Sophia, darling, why don't you go to the art room? I believe Mrs. Patterson has set up some new watercolors for you to try." Sophia looked up at her mother with relief flooding her eyes, then glanced nervously at Victoria. "But Aunt Victoria said painting is a waste of time." "Art is never a waste of time for someone with talent," Elena said firmly, her eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "Now go ahead, sweetheart. I'll join you shortly." After Sophia had left the room, closing the door behind her with obvious relief, Elena turned to face Victoria. The older woman stood with her arms crossed, an expression of mild irritation on her face, as if she had been interrupted during some necessary but unpleasant task. "Victoria," Elena began, her voice deceptively calm, "I need to speak with you about your interactions with my daughter." "My interactions?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I'm simply trying to prepare her for her role. Someone needs to, given that you seem more interested in coddling her than preparing her for real responsibility." Elena felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. Preparing her for her role doesn't require destroying her confidence or making her feel inadequate. "Confidence?" Victoria laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the ornate walls. "False confidence serves no one, Elena. The child needs to understand that she has significant deficiencies that must be addressed. Pretending otherwise does her no favors." "She's 8 years old," Elena said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself and lowered it again. "She's a child who deserves to feel loved and supported, not criticized and belittled." Victoria's expression hardened. Perhaps that's the problem. She had always been sensitive about her commoner background, despite her successful integration into royal life. But hearing it used as a weapon against her parenting made her blood boil. "My background has nothing to do with my ability to love and guide my daughter," Elena said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Doesn't it?" Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a more intimate, cutting tone. "You fill her head with dreams of being an artist. You encourage her sensitivity. You tell her that her feelings matter more than her duty. These are not the lessons of someone who understands royal responsibility." Elena realized that this conversation had been brewing for months, perhaps years. Victoria had been systematically undermining her parenting, criticizing her methods, and apparently taking it upon herself to correct what she saw as Elena's failures. "I will not have you speaking to my daughter the way you were speaking to her this morning," Elena said firmly. "She will not be called names, she will not be made to feel ashamed of her interests, and she will not be told that she's a disappointment." Victoria's smile was cold and calculating. "And what exactly do you plan to do about it?" "This is my family's ancestral home, Elena. I've lived here far longer than you have, and I'll continue to live here long after you've perhaps moved on to whatever common people do when their fairy tale marriages end." The implication was clear, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Victoria wasn't just criticizing her parenting. She was questioning the stability of her marriage and her place in the family. "Are you threatening me?" Elena asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm simply stating facts," Victoria replied with a shrug. "You married into this family, but blood runs deeper than marriage certificates. Prince Alexander will always prioritize family unity over temporary emotional attachments. Elena stared at the woman who had just revealed herself to be far more calculating and cruel than she had ever imagined. She realized that Victoria saw her not as family, but as an interloper who needed to be managed and eventually removed. "I think this conversation is over," Elena said, turning toward the door. "For now," Victoria called after her. "But, Elena, do remember that children are very perceptive. Sophia is beginning to understand her place in the world, and it would be a shame if she had to learn some hard truths about her mother's limitations." Elena paused at the door, her hand on the handle. The threat was clear. Victoria would continue to undermine both Elena and Sophia, working to turn the child against her own mother while systematically destroying her confidence and spirit. As Elena left the room, she realized that everything had changed. The careful balance she had maintained, the diplomatic relationships she had cultivated, the peaceful coexistence she had worked so hard to achieve, all of it was crumbling. Victoria had declared war, and Sophia was caught in the crossfire. Walking through the palace corridors toward the art room where her daughter waited, Elena felt something fundamental shifting inside her. For years, she had prioritized keeping the peace, maintaining harmony, and proving herself worthy of her position. But watching her child's spirit being systematically destroyed had awakened something fierce and protective that she hadn't known existed. The gilded cage she had accepted as her new world was becoming a battlefield, and Elena was beginning to realize that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost to her carefully crafted royal image. Elena found Sophia in the art room, sitting quietly at her small easel with tears still fresh on her cheeks. The watercolors Mrs. Patterson had prepared remained untouched, the little girl's usual enthusiasm for painting completely absent. The sight of her daughter's defeated posture sent another wave of protective fury through Elena's chest. "Mama," Sophia said softly as Elena entered the room. "Did I do something wrong? Aunt Victoria seems angry with me all the time now." Elena's heart broke at the confusion and hurt in her daughter's voice. She knelt beside Sophia's chair, taking the small hands in her own. "You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. Nothing at all. But she said I was embarrassing at the charity lunch, and that my curtsy was terrible, and that you don't know how to teach me proper royal things because you weren't born a princess." Sophia's words tumbled out in a rush, her 8-year-old mind trying to process the adult cruelty she had been subjected to. Elena felt her composure threatening to crack completely. Hearing her daughter repeat Victoria's harsh words made them even more painful. "Sophia, listen to me very carefully. You are a wonderful little girl with so many talents and so much kindness in your heart. Your curtsy was perfectly fine, and even if it wasn't, that would be okay too. We all learn at our own pace. But Aunt Victoria says royal children have to be perfect," Sophia whispered, her eyes wide with the burden of expectations too heavy for her small shoulders. "No one is perfect, darling. Not even royal children. And anyone who tells you that you have to be perfect is wrong." Elena brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face, marveling at how Victoria's poisonous words had already begun to take root in the child's mind. "She says you don't understand royal things because you used to be a regular person. Is that why Papa sometimes looks sad when you and Aunt Victoria talk?" Elena's breath caught. Her daughter was more perceptive than she had realized, picking up on the underlying tensions that had been growing in the household. Alexander had indeed seemed strained lately, caught between his loyalty to his sister-in-law and his love for his wife and daughter. "Your father loves us both very much," Elena said carefully, not wanting to burden Sophia with adult problems while also not wanting to lie to her. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about how to do things, but that doesn't mean anyone is sad about our family. Can I still paint flowers, Mama? Even if Aunt Victoria says it's not important for princesses?" The question revealed how deeply Victoria's criticism had affected the child. Sophia was already beginning to doubt the things that brought her joy, questioning whether her interests were acceptable for someone of her position. "You can paint anything you want, sweetheart. Your artwork is beautiful, and creativity is one of the most valuable gifts a person can have." Elena picked up a brush and handed it to her daughter. "Why don't you show me what you were working on yesterday?" As Sophia began to paint, her concentration gradually replacing the anxiety that had clouded her features, Elena's mind raced with the implications of what had happened. Victoria's behavior wasn't just occasional strictness or old-fashioned discipline. It was systematic emotional manipulation designed to undermine both Sophia's confidence and Elena's role as a mother. The realization hit Elena that this morning's incident was likely not isolated. How many other times had Victoria spoken to Sophia this way when Elena wasn't present? How long had her daughter been subjected to this kind of treatment, believing that she had to endure it because Aunt Victoria was family and royalty demanded respect for elders? "Mama," Sophia said as she carefully painted the petals of a rose, "do you think Aunt Victoria is right that I'm not good enough to be a real princess?" The question was like a knife to Elena's heart. Her 8-year-old daughter was questioning her very worth, her place in the world, because of Victoria's cruel words. Elena realized that she was facing a crisis that went far beyond family disagreements or personality clashes. This was about protecting her child's fundamental sense of self. "Sophia, you are already a real princess, and you are more than good enough. You are kind, intelligent, creative, and loving. Those are the qualities that make someone truly royal, not perfect curtsies or speaking multiple languages. But Aunt Victoria knows more about being royal than I do. She's been a princess her whole life." Elena paused, considering her words carefully. She didn't want to speak negatively about Victoria to her daughter, but she also couldn't allow the woman's destructive influence to continue unchallenged. Being royal isn't about following a list of rules or being perfect all the time. It's about using your position to help others and to make the world a little bit better. You do that every time you're kind to someone or when you create something beautiful that makes people smile. Sophia looked up from her painting, her young face serious. "Will Aunt Victoria always live here with us?" The question revealed another layer of the problem. Sophia was already beginning to dread Victoria's presence, to see their home as a place where she might be criticized or made to feel inadequate at any moment. "This is our home, darling. Yours, mine, and Papa's. And no one should make you feel uncomfortable or unwelcome in your own home." Elena made a silent vow to herself that Victoria's reign of emotional terrorism would end, regardless of the family complications it might cause. Her daughter's well-being was more important than maintaining false peace or avoiding difficult conversations with Alexander. After spending an hour in the art room, during which Sophia's natural exuberance gradually returned as they painted together, Elena walked her daughter to her tutoring session with Mr. Harrison, the gentle elderly man who had been teaching royal children for over 30 years. Elena made a mental note to speak with him privately about any changes he might have noticed in Sophia's behavior or confidence levels. As Elena made her way to her private office, she encountered several palace staff members who greeted her with their usual respectful warmth. But she noticed something she hadn't seen before, the way some of them glanced around nervously, as if checking to see who else might be listening. It occurred to her that Victoria's behavior might not be limited to family members. In her office, Elena sat down at her desk and opened her laptop, intending to review the guest list for the upcoming state dinner. But her mind kept returning to the morning's events and Sophia's heartbreaking questions. She found herself staring at the screen without seeing the words, her thoughts consumed with how to protect her daughter while navigating the complex dynamics of royal family politics. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting to see her secretary with the afternoon schedule. Instead, Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who supervised the children's activities and had been with the royal household for over 40 years, entered with a concerned expression on her face. "Your Royal Highness, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I felt I needed to speak with you about Princess Sophia." Elena gestured for her to sit, sensing that this conversation would be significant. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. What's on your mind?" The older woman clasped her hands in her lap, clearly uncomfortable but determined to speak. "I've been caring for royal children for most of my adult life, Your Highness, and I've seen how they flourish under different types of guidance. Princess Sophia is a delightful child with a gentle spirit and considerable talents." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I think so too. However," Mrs. Patterson continued carefully, "I've noticed some changes in the princess over the past several months. She's become more withdrawn during her activities, less willing to try new things, and she often seems anxious about making mistakes." Elena's heart sank, though she wasn't entirely surprised by this observation. "Have you noticed anything specific that might have contributed to these changes?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated, clearly weighing her words carefully. As a long-term employee, she would be well aware of the delicate nature of commenting on family dynamics. "I have occasionally overheard conversations between Princess Sophia and Lady Victoria that seemed intense. The princess often appears quite subdued after these interactions." "What kind of conversations?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. Lady Victoria has very strong opinions about proper behavior and deportment. While structure is certainly important for royal children, Princess Sophia seems to interpret Lady Victoria's guidance as criticism rather than instruction. Elena appreciated Mrs. Patterson's diplomatic phrasing, but she could read between the lines. The woman was telling her that Victoria's approach was damaging Sophia's spirit and confidence. Mrs. Patterson, I want you to know that you can speak freely with me about anything concerning my daughter's well-being. Your observations are valuable, and I won't let anyone face consequences for sharing them. The older woman's relief was visible. Thank you, Your Highness. I must say that Princess Sophia has always thrived in environments where her curiosity and creativity are encouraged. Her artwork has improved remarkably, and she has such a natural way with the younger children when they visit for events. But, lately, she seems to second-guess herself constantly. Elena nodded, her worst fears being confirmed. Victoria's treatment of Sophia was having exactly the destructive effect she had suspected. I also wanted to mention, Mrs. Patterson continued, that Lady Victoria has made some comments about the activities I've been organizing for Princess Sophia. She feels that art and music are taking time away from more important subjects. And what do you think about that assessment? In my experience, Your Highness, creative activities actually enhance a child's learning in other areas. They develop problem-solving skills, emotional intelligence, and cultural appreciation. For a future royal who will need to connect with people from all walks of life, these skills are invaluable. Elena felt validated in her instincts about her daughter's education. She had fought her own doubts about whether she was being too permissive, whether Victoria's more traditional approach might indeed be better for Sophia's future role. But, hearing from someone with Mrs. Patterson's experience confirmed that her maternal instincts had been correct. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mrs. Patterson. Your insights are extremely helpful, and I want you to know that I fully support the activities you've been organizing for Sophia. Please continue to encourage her interests and creativity. After Mrs. Patterson left, Elena sat alone in her office, the weight of the morning's revelations settling heavily on her shoulders. She was no longer dealing with a personality conflict or generational differences in child-rearing philosophies. She was facing a systematic campaign to undermine her daughter's confidence and her own authority as a mother. The thought that this had been going on for months without her full awareness filled her with guilt and anger. How had she been so focused on maintaining family harmony that she had missed the signs of her daughter's distress? How many times had Sophia suffered through Victoria's harsh treatment, believing that she had no choice but to endure it? Elena realized that her next conversation would have to be with Alexander. She could no longer handle this situation diplomatically or try to work around Victoria's behavior. Her husband needed to understand what was happening and choose where his loyalties lay. The very thought of that conversation filled her with apprehension, but she knew that protecting Sophia was worth any amount of family discord. As she prepared to leave her office to find Alexander, Elena caught sight of herself in the mirror on the wall. The woman looking back at her still appeared composed and regal, but something fundamental had changed in her eyes. The willingness to compromise and accommodate that had defined her approach to royal life was being replaced by something fiercer and more determined. She was no longer just a duchess trying to fit into an established family structure. She was a mother preparing to fight for her child's well-being, and that change would reshape everything about how she navigated the treacherous waters of royal family politics. Elena found Alexander in his private study, surrounded by documents related to upcoming diplomatic meetings. At 38, her husband maintained the controlled demeanor that had been drilled into him from childhood, but Elena had learned to read the subtle signs of stress in the way he held his shoulders and the slight tension around his eyes. "Alexander," she said, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk about Victoria and Sophia." Her husband looked up from his papers, and Elena saw a flash of something. Was it resignation? Cross his features before his diplomatic mask fell back into place. "Has something happened?" he asked, though his tone suggested he might already suspect what was coming. "This morning I witnessed Victoria speaking to Sophia in a way that was completely inappropriate. She called our daughter pathetic, told her she was an embarrassment, and suggested that my common background makes me unsuitable to raise a royal child." Alexander set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. "Elena, I know Victoria can be direct, but she genuinely believes she's helping prepare Sophia for her future responsibilities." "Direct?" Elena's carefully controlled tone cracked slightly. "Alexander, She made our 8-year-old daughter cry. She told her that her interests were worthless and that she was a disappointment to the family. That's not direct. That's cruel. Victoria has very traditional views about royal education. She's concerned that Sophia isn't being prepared adequately for the pressures she'll face as she grows older. Elena stared at her husband, shocked by his measured response. She had expected concern, anger on behalf of their daughter, immediate action to address the situation. Instead, she was getting diplomatic explanations and careful neutrality. So you think it's acceptable for your sister-in-law to emotionally abuse our child in the name of preparation? That's a very strong accusation, Elena. Alexander's voice carried a warning tone. Victoria has been part of this family far longer than either of us has been parents. She raised her own children successfully, and she has genuine affection for Sophia. Genuine affection? Alexander, Mrs. Patterson just told me that Sophia has become withdrawn and anxious over the past several months. Our daughter asked me this morning if she's not good enough to be a real princess because of the things Victoria has been telling her. For the first time, Alexander showed a crack in his composed facade. Sophia said that. She's being systematically torn down by someone who should be supporting her. And now I discover that you've been aware of Victoria's direct approach and haven't seen fit to intervene. Alexander stood and moved to the window, looking out over the palace grounds. This family has maintained its position for centuries because we understand the importance of discipline and proper behavior. Perhaps Victoria's methods seem harsh, but they come from a place of caring about Sophia's future. Elena felt as though she was speaking to a stranger. The man she had fallen in love with, who had been gentle and loving during their courtship, seemed to have been replaced by someone who prioritized family tradition over their child's emotional well-being. Alexander, listen to what you're saying. You're defending emotional cruelty because it's wrapped in tradition and delivered by someone with the right bloodline. I'm trying to maintain balance in a complex family situation. Victoria lost her husband 3 years ago. She's grieving, and she's trying to find purpose in helping with Sophia's education. Yes, perhaps she's too harsh sometimes, but completely excluding her would be what? Would be putting our daughter's well-being first. Elena's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. Would be acting like parents instead of diplomats. Alexander turned from the window to face her, and Elena saw something in his expression that chilled her. There was love there, but also calculation, as if he was weighing her importance against other family considerations. Elena, you have to understand the position we're in. Victoria is not just family. She represents continuity with our traditions and values. Completely alienating her would cause significant problems within the broader royal household. And what about completely alienating your wife and traumatizing your daughter? Are those acceptable casualties in your effort to keep Victoria happy? That's not fair. I love you and Sophia more than anything. But I also have responsibilities to this family and this institution that extend beyond our personal preferences. Elena realized with growing horror that Alexander was prioritizing the abstract concept of family unity over the concrete reality of their daughter's suffering. The man she had married, who had promised to love and protect both her and Sophia, was choosing institutional loyalty over parental duty. Alexander, I need you to understand something. I will not allow Victoria to continue treating Sophia the way she has been. I don't care about her grief, I don't care about tradition, and I don't care about family politics. Our daughter's well-being is not negotiable. And what exactly are you planning to do? Forbid Victoria from interacting with Sophia? Create an open conflict in the household? Elena, you're not thinking about the broader implications. I'm thinking exactly about the implications. I'm thinking about what happens to a child who grows up believing she's not good enough, who loses her confidence and creativity because someone convinced her that her natural personality is wrong. Alexander moved closer to her, his voice taking on the persuasive tone she had heard him use in diplomatic negotiations. Look, I'll speak with Victoria. I'll ask her to moderate her approach and be more sensitive to Sophia's feelings. We can find a middle ground that works for everyone. A middle ground. Elena stared at him in disbelief. Alexander, this isn't a trade negotiation. This is about protecting our child from someone who is damaging her psychologically. Victoria is not some monster, Elena. She's a woman who has devoted her life to this family and who believes she's doing what's best for Sophia. Surely we can find a way to work with her rather than creating an adversarial situation. Elena realized that Alexander fundamentally didn't understand the severity of what was happening. In his world of diplomatic solutions and careful compromise, he couldn't grasp that some situations required clear lines and absolute positions. Let me ask you something, Alexander. If someone outside this family was treating Sophia the way Victoria has been treating her, what would you do? That's different. Family situations require more nuanced handling. No, they don't. They require more protection, not less. Family members who abuse their position should face consequences, not accommodation. Abuse is a very serious accusation, Elena. You need to be careful about the language you use and the conclusions you draw. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest as she realized that her husband was more concerned about protecting Victoria's reputation than addressing her behavior. The man who should have been her strongest ally in protecting their daughter was instead asking her to moderate her language and lower her expectations. I'm going to ask you directly, Alexander. Will you support me in setting boundaries with Victoria to protect Sophia? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. Finally, he spoke, his voice carefully measured. I will speak with Victoria about being more sensitive in her approach. I will suggest that she work on building Sophia's confidence rather than focusing on her shortcomings. But I won't support any action that completely excludes Victoria from Sophia's life or that creates permanent division in this family. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her husband, the man she had trusted to help her navigate the complexities of royal life, was essentially abandoning her and their daughter in favor of maintaining the status quo. So if Victoria continues to tear down our daughter's confidence, as long as she does it politely and calls it education, you'll continue to enable her. Elena, you're being dramatic. I'm offering to address this situation in a way that respects everyone's position and feelings. Everyone except Sophia, apparently. I won't let you put me in a position where I have to choose between my family's unity and your interpretation of what happened this morning. Elena stared at her husband, understanding for the first time that in his hierarchy of loyalties, she and Sophia were not at the top. The institution, the tradition, the complex web of family obligations, these things took precedence over their daughter's emotional well-being. Then, I suppose we have nothing more to discuss, Elena said quietly. Elena, don't make this into something bigger than it needs to be. We can work through this if you're willing to be reasonable. Reasonable, Elena repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. Reasonable would be protecting our child. Reasonable would be standing with your wife when she tells you that your daughter is being mistreated. Reasonable would be recognizing that Victoria's behavior is unacceptable, regardless of her position in the family. And reasonable would also be recognizing that we live in a complex situation that requires careful handling, not emotional reactions. Elena realized that continuing the conversation would be futile. Alexander had made his position clear. He would offer token gestures toward addressing Victoria's behavior, but he would not take any meaningful action that might disrupt family harmony. I need to check on Sophia, Elena said, moving toward the door. Elena, please don't do anything rash. Give me a chance to speak with Victoria and see if we can resolve this quietly. Elena paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Alexander, I want you to understand something. I came to you first because I believed you would help me protect our daughter. I hoped that you would see this situation clearly and support me in addressing it. But if you won't act to protect Sophia, then I will. And I won't be asking for permission or consensus. What does that mean? Elena looked back at her husband, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time since their marriage. He was a good man in many ways, but he had been shaped by a system that valued institutional stability over individual well-being, diplomatic solutions over moral clarity. It means that I'm no longer going to prioritize family harmony over my daughter's safety and happiness. It means that Victoria's feelings and position in this household are no longer considerations in my decision-making. And it means that if you can't be the partner I need in protecting our child, then I'll do it alone. As Elena left Alexander's study, she felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of her marriage and her place in the royal family. The careful balance she had maintained, the compromises she had made, the diplomatic approach she had taken to every challenge, all of it was crumbling under the weight of a mother's protective instinct. She was no longer the accommodating duchess who sought harmony above all else. She was a mother who had discovered that her child was being systematically damaged by someone the family considered untouchable, and that discovery was transforming her into someone far more dangerous than anyone in the palace had imagined. The rules of engagement had just changed, and Elena was no longer playing by the royal family's handbook of diplomacy and careful compromise. She was playing by the rules of maternal protection and Those rules were far more primal and unforgiving than anything Victoria had ever encountered. That evening, Elena found herself in a position she had never imagined, lying in bed next to her husband while feeling completely isolated from him. Alexander had attempted several times throughout the afternoon to engage her in conversation about finding a workable solution, but each attempt had only reinforced Elena's growing understanding that they fundamentally disagreed about what constituted acceptable treatment of their daughter. The turning point came the next morning when Elena arrived at the breakfast room to find Victoria once again alone with Sophia. This time, however, Elena deliberately remained hidden behind the partially open door, determined to witness the full extent of Victoria's behavior without interruption. "Princess Sophia," Victoria was saying, her voice carrying that familiar cold edge, "I've spoken with your father about your education, and we agree that some significant changes need to be made." Elena's blood ran cold. Alexander had apparently spoken with Victoria, but instead of setting boundaries, he had seemingly given her more authority over Sophia's life. "What kind of changes?" Sophia asked, her voice small and uncertain. "First, these art sessions will be reduced to once a week at most. A future queen cannot spend her time playing with paints when she should be learning languages and protocol. Second, you'll be spending more time with me learning proper deportment and social graces. Your behavior at public events has been noticed by important people." Elena watched her daughter's face crumble. The art sessions were Sophia's favorite part of each day, the time when she felt most confident and happy. Victoria was systematically removing every source of joy and confidence from the child's life. "But Mama said I was getting really good at painting flowers," Sophia protested weakly. "Your mother," Victoria said with obvious disdain, "has many opinions about things she doesn't understand. Art may seem important to her, but she wasn't raised to understand the real responsibilities of royal life. You need to start thinking about what truly matters." "Does Papa agree with you?" Sophia asked, and Elena could hear the hope in her daughter's voice that her father might intervene. "Your father understands that I have more experience with royal education than anyone else in this household. He trusts my judgment about what's best for your development." Elena felt sick. Victoria was using Alexander's implicit endorsement to completely override Elena's authority as Sophia's mother, and she was doing it in a way that made the child feel abandoned by both parents. "Now," Victoria continued, "let's practice your posture. You've been slouching again, and it makes you look common. Royal children stand straight because they understand their importance." Elena watched her daughter straighten her shoulders, but she could see the defeat in Sophia's eyes. The confident, creative child who had painted beautiful flowers just yesterday was being methodically transformed into an anxious, subdued shadow of herself. "Better, but your chin is still too low. You need to look people in the eye, not at the floor like a servant. Confidence comes from understanding your superior position." The irony was devastating. Victoria was demanding confidence while systematically destroying every foundation upon which a child's real confidence could be built. She was teaching Sophia to project superiority while making her feel fundamentally inadequate. "I don't feel superior to anyone," Sophia said quietly, and Elena's heart broke at the confusion in her daughter's voice. "That's exactly the problem," Victoria snapped. "Your mother has filled your head with nonsense about treating everyone equally and being kind to those beneath your station. While kindness has its place, you must never forget that you are fundamentally different from common people." Elena had heard enough. She pushed open the door and entered the room with deliberate calm, though every muscle in her body was tense with rage. "Good morning, Sophia." Victoria. Her voice was pleasant, but carried an undertone that made both her daughter and sister-in-law look at her with surprise. "Elena," Victoria said with a slight smile, "I was just explaining to Sophia some new arrangements for her education that Alexander and I discussed." "How interesting," Elena replied, moving to stand beside her daughter. "And where exactly do I fit into these educational decisions regarding my child?" "Well, naturally, as Sophia's parents, you and Alexander make the final decisions. But given my experience with royal children and your different background, it seemed logical for Alexander to rely heavily on my guidance." Elena felt the carefully constructed composure she had maintained for years beginning to crack. "My different background. Of course, these aren't criticisms, Elena, simply acknowledgments of reality. You came to royal life as an adult, while some of us have generations of experience with proper royal education." Elena looked down at Sophia, who was watching this exchange with wide, worried eyes. Her daughter was caught in the middle of an adult conflict she didn't understand, watching her mother's authority being undermined by someone who claimed to act in her best interests. "Sophia," Elena said gently, "would you mind going to your room for a few minutes? I need to have a conversation with Lady Victoria." "But we weren't finished with posture practice," Victoria interjected. "And punctuality is an important lesson for royal children." Elena turned to face Victoria fully, and something in her expression made the older woman step back slightly. "Sophia, please go to your room now." After Sophia left, closing the door behind her with obvious relief to escape the tension, Elena turned her full attention to Victoria. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. The diplomatic smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of cold fury that Victoria had never seen from the usually accommodating Duchess. "Let me make something very clear," Elena said, her voice quiet but deadly. "You will never again make decisions about my daughter's education without consulting me first. You will never again suggest to her that my background makes me unsuitable to guide her. And you will never again systematically undermine her confidence while claiming to prepare her for royal life." Victoria's eyebrows rose in apparent surprise at Elena's tone. "My dear, I think you're overreacting to what was simply a conversation about educational priorities." "No," Elena said, stepping closer to Victoria. "This was the continuation of a campaign you've been waging against both my daughter and me for months. And it ends now." "Campaign?" "Elena, I think you've been reading too much into normal family dynamics. Perhaps your inexperience with royal households has led to some misunderstandings." Elena felt something snap inside her. The careful diplomat, the accommodating Duchess, the woman who had spent years trying to prove herself worthy of her position, that woman disappeared entirely. "Stop," Elena said, her voice cutting through Victoria's condescending explanations like a blade. "Stop pretending this is about education or family dynamics or my inexperience. This is about you systematically destroying an 8-year-old child's confidence because you resent her mother's place in this family." Victoria's composure slipped for the first time, a flash of genuine surprise crossing her features at Elena's directness. "You've been telling my daughter that she's inadequate, that her interests are worthless, that she's an embarrassment to the family. You've been undermining my authority as her mother and suggesting that my background makes me unfit to raise her. And you've been doing all of this while hiding behind claims of tradition and education. Elena, I think you need to calm down and consider what you're saying. I'm saying that you're an emotionally abusive woman who has been given free rein to damage a child because everyone in this family is too concerned with maintaining harmony to call you what you are." Victoria's mask of surprised innocence fell away entirely, replaced by cold anger. "How dare you speak to me that way? I have devoted my life to this family, and I will not be lectured by someone who married her way into it." "There it is," Elena said with grim satisfaction. "The truth finally comes out. This isn't about Sophia's education or my parenting. This is about your belief that I don't belong here and your decision to take that resentment out on my child." "Your child?" Victoria's voice turned venomous. "Sophia is a princess of this realm first, and your daughter second. She belongs to this family and this institution, and she will be raised according to our standards, not yours." Elena felt a cold clarity settle over her. Every diplomatic instinct, every lesson in royal protocol, every habit of accommodation and compromise fell away, leaving something primal and fierce. Sophia belongs to no one except herself. She is not a possession of this family or this institution. She is not a project for you to mold according to your twisted ideas about royal superiority. She is a child who deserves to feel loved and valued for who she is, not criticized and diminished in the name of preparation. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Victoria said, her composure completely shattered now. "You've been here for what, 6 years? I've been part of this family my entire life. I understand the pressures and expectations that Sophia will face, and I'm trying to prepare her for reality." "Your reality," Elena corrected. "Your bitter, cruel, lonely reality where children must be broken down and rebuilt according to someone else's specifications. Where love is conditional on meeting impossible standards and where natural personality traits are seen as flaws to be corrected." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "At least I understand that being royal comes with sacrifices and responsibilities. You want to raise her like a common child with common dreams and common expectations. But she's not common, Elena. She will never be common, no matter how much you want to pretend otherwise. Being royal doesn't mean being miserable. It doesn't mean sacrificing creativity or kindness or joy. And it certainly doesn't mean accepting emotional abuse from family members who hide their cruelty behind tradition. Emotional abuse. Victoria laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the ornate walls. I'm trying to save that child from the disappointment of believing she can live in your fantasy world where royal children get to follow their every whim and pursue their little hobbies without consequences. Elena realized that Victoria genuinely believed her own justifications. In her mind, cruelty was kindness, criticism was care, and destroying a child's spirit was necessary preparation for real life. Here's what's going to happen, Elena said, her voice deadly calm. You will no longer have any role in Sophia's education or daily care. You will not make decisions about her schedule, her activities, or her development. When you interact with her, you will be kind and supportive, or you will not interact with her at all. Victoria stared at Elena in apparent disbelief. You can't be serious. You have no authority to make such demands. This is my family's ancestral home, and Sophia is as much my responsibility as yours. Watch me, Elena said simply. Alexander will never support this. He understands the importance of family unity and proper royal education. He won't let you alienate me based on your emotional overreactions. Elena felt a sad smile cross her lips. We'll see. As she turned to leave the room, Victoria called after her with venom in her voice. You think you can come into this family and change everything to suit your common sensibilities, but you're wrong. There are consequences for people who don't understand their place, Elena, and those consequences extend to their children. Elena paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm simply stating a fact. Children who aren't properly prepared for royal life face very public failures. It would be a shame if Sophia's future difficulties could be traced back to her mother's stubborn refusal to accept guidance from those who know better. Elena turned slowly to face Victoria one last time. If you ever again threaten my daughter's future or well-being, you will discover exactly how dangerous a mother can be when her child is threatened. Royal protocol, family harmony, and diplomatic considerations will not protect you. As Elena left the breakfast room, she realized that she had just declared war on the most influential member of the royal household after her husband. Victoria had connections, influence, and generations of experience navigating royal politics. But Elena had something Victoria didn't understand: the absolutely uncompromising fury of a mother whose child was in danger. The careful balance of power in Thornwick Palace was about to shift dramatically, and everyone involved was about to discover that royal blood was not stronger than maternal instinct. The confrontation with Victoria marked the beginning of what Elena would later think of as the war for Sophia's soul. Within hours of their heated exchange, Elena could feel the subtle but unmistakable shift in the palace atmosphere. Servants who had been warm and friendly became formally polite. Staff members who had sought her opinion began deferring to Victoria's preferences. Alexander became even more diplomatically distant, speaking to Elena with careful politeness that felt worse than open anger. But Elena no longer cared about palace politics or family harmony. She had seen her daughter's spirit being systematically destroyed, and she would not compromise or negotiate when it came to Sophia's well-being. The first test came 2 days later when Elena discovered that Victoria had arranged for Sophia to begin intensive etiquette training with Lady Margaret Thornberry, a woman whose reputation for harsh discipline with royal children was legendary. Elena learned about this arrangement not from her husband or from Victoria, but from Mrs. Patterson, who appeared in Elena's office with obvious distress written across her features. Your Highness, Mrs. Patterson said, I felt you should know that arrangements have been made for Princess Sophia to begin daily sessions with Lady Margaret starting Monday. Elena set down her pen and gave Mrs. Patterson her full attention. I'm not familiar with any such arrangements. What exactly has been planned? Lady Victoria has engaged Lady Margaret to provide comprehensive deportment and protocol training for the princess. The sessions are to be 3 hours daily, replacing the art instruction and the nature walks that Princess Sophia enjoys so much. Elena felt ice form in her veins. 3 hours of daily intensive training with a woman known for reducing children to tears was Victoria's answer to Elena's demands for respectful treatment of Sophia. And who authorized this arrangement? Mrs. Patterson looked deeply uncomfortable. I believe the authorization came through Prince Alexander's office, though I understand the initial suggestion came from Lady Victoria. Elena realized that Alexander was continuing to enable Victoria's control over Sophia while maintaining plausible deniability by routing decisions through official channels. He was effectively allowing Victoria to escalate her campaign against both Elena and Sophia while keeping his own hands diplomatically clean. Mrs. Patterson, please inform Lady Margaret's office that Princess Sophia will not be available for the arranged sessions. Any future educational arrangements for my daughter will be made through my office. Your Highness, I believe Lady Victoria has already signed contracts and made financial commitments for these sessions. Then, Lady Victoria should have consulted me before making commitments regarding my child. The sessions are cancelled. After Mrs. Patterson left, Elena sat in her office contemplating the chess game that was now being played with her daughter as the prize. Victoria was escalating by making increasingly aggressive moves to establish control over Sophia's life, while Alexander was providing just enough support to enable Victoria while maintaining his position as a neutral peacekeeper. Elena realized that she was facing a coordinated campaign designed to overwhelm her with multiple crises, while positioning any resistance as unreasonable or emotional. It was a sophisticated strategy that relied on Elena's desire to maintain family harmony and avoid public scandal. But Elena no longer cared about any of those considerations. Victoria and Alexander had made the mistake of believing that Elena's diplomatic nature reflected weakness rather than choice. They were about to discover their error. Elena's first move was to schedule a meeting with the palace's senior staff. She had learned enough about royal household management to understand that the real power often lay with the people who managed daily operations. If she could secure their support, or at least their neutrality, Victoria's ability to manipulate situations would be significantly reduced. The meeting took place in the formal conference room, with Elena taking the chair at the head of the table, a symbolic choice that was not lost on anyone present. The senior staff members, including Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Harrison, Sophia's tutor, the head of household security, and the palace communications director, were clearly nervous about being called together for an unscheduled meeting. Thank you all for coming, Elena began, her voice calm but authoritative. I've called this meeting to clarify some important matters regarding Princess Sophia's care and education. She could see several staff members exchange glances, obviously aware of the underlying tensions in the household. There seems to have been some confusion about decision-making authority regarding my daughter's schedule and activities. I want to make it absolutely clear that any arrangements affecting Princess Sophia's daily routine, education, or activities must be approved through my office. No exceptions. Mr. Harrison, the elderly tutor who had been with the family for decades, cleared his throat carefully. Your Royal Highness, we've traditionally coordinated with various family members who take interest in the children's development. And I appreciate everyone's dedication to Sophia's well-being. However, going forward, I will be the primary point of contact for all decisions regarding my daughter. This includes educational arrangements, social activities, and any modifications to her schedule. Elena could see the staff members processing this information, clearly understanding that she was asserting authority that had previously been shared or delegated within the family structure. I also want to address Princess Sophia's emotional well-being, Elena continued. If any of you observe interactions that seem to cause distress to my daughter, I want to be informed immediately. Sophia's happiness and confidence are priorities that will not be compromised for any other consideration. The palace communications director, a sharp woman in her 50s named Margaret Davies, spoke up carefully. Your Highness, are there specific concerns we should be aware of regarding the princess's well-being? There have been some approaches to Sophia's education that I believe are counterproductive. Going forward, any instruction or guidance provided to my daughter should focus on building her confidence and nurturing her natural abilities rather than criticizing her shortcomings. Elena could see understanding dawn in several faces around the table. The staff was well aware of Victoria's harsh approach, but they had been caught between competing authorities within the family hierarchy. I understand that this may put you in difficult positions if there are conflicting instructions from different family members, Elena continued. In such cases, my authority regarding Princess Sophia takes precedence, and I will handle any family discussions that arise from these decisions. After the meeting concluded, Mrs. Patterson approached Elena privately. Your Highness, I want you to know that many of us have been concerned about Princess Sophia's happiness lately. We're relieved to see you taking such a direct interest in protecting her well-being. Has the situation been obvious to everyone? Elena asked. Those of us who work closely with the children have noticed the changes in Princess Sophia over the past several months. She's become much more anxious and self-conscious. But Addressing family dynamics isn't exactly within our purview. It is now, Elena said firmly. If anyone makes my daughter feel inadequate or unwelcome in her own home, I want to know about it immediately. Elena's next step was the most difficult. A final conversation with Alexander that would determine whether their marriage could survive the fundamental disagreement about protecting their daughter. She found him in their private sitting room that evening, reading diplomatic cables with a glass of whiskey at his elbow. The scene was achingly familiar. How many evenings had they spent like this, sharing comfortable silence while pursuing their respective responsibilities? But the easy intimacy that had once characterized their relationship felt like something from another lifetime. Alexander, we need to talk. He looked up from his papers with the wary expression she had grown accustomed to seeing. What's happened now? I canceled the etiquette training sessions that Victoria arranged for Sophia. Alexander set down his papers with a sigh. Elena, we discussed this. I spoke with Victoria about being more sensitive in her approach. And her idea of being more sensitive was to arrange 3 hours of daily intensive training with Lady Margaret Thornberry without consulting me. Lady Margaret is highly respected. Many royal children have benefited from her instruction. Elena stared at her husband, marveling at his ability to miss the point entirely. Alexander, this isn't about the quality of instruction. This is about the complete disregard for my authority as Sophia's mother and the escalating campaign to overwhelm our daughter with criticism disguised as education. Elena, you're seeing conspiracies where there are simply different opinions about child-rearing approaches. Different opinions? Alexander, our daughter asked me yesterday if we were going to send her away to boarding school because she's too disappointing to live at home. Where do you think she got that idea? For the first time, Elena saw genuine shock cross Alexander's features. She said that. She's 8 years old, and she's convinced that she's fundamentally flawed and disappointing. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when someone systematically destroys a child's confidence while claiming to help them. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him processing this information. Finally, he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. I'll speak with Victoria again. I'll make it clear that any criticism of Sophia needs to be balanced with positive reinforcement. Elena realized that even faced with evidence of their daughter's distress, Alexander still believed that the solution lay in finding a compromise with Victoria rather than establishing firm boundaries. Alexander, I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is not a problem that can be solved with diplomatic conversations or careful balancing of interests. Victoria is damaging our daughter psychologically, and she will continue to do so as long as she has access and authority. You're asking me to choose between my family and my wife. I'm asking you to choose between enabling someone who is hurting our child and protecting that child. I'm asking you to be a father first and a diplomat second. Alexander stood and moved to the window, his shoulders tense with the internal conflict Elena could see playing out across his features. If I completely support your position, if I tell Victoria that she can no longer have any role in Sophia's education, it will destroy the family unity that we've worked so hard to maintain. It will create permanent divisions and resentments that will affect everyone in this household. And if you continue to enable Victoria's behavior, it will destroy our daughter's confidence and spirit. It will also destroy my respect for you as a husband and father. Alexander turned to face her, and Elena saw pain in his eyes alongside the calculation she had grown to recognize. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you the truth about the choice you have to make. You can protect the abstract concept of family harmony, or you can protect your actual child from someone who is damaging her. But you cannot do both. Elena, there has to be a middle ground. Victoria is not a monster. She's a grieving woman who genuinely believes she's helping Sophia prepare for a difficult role. Her motivations are irrelevant. Her impact on our daughter is what matters, and that impact is unacceptable. Elena could see that she was not reaching him, that his training in diplomatic solutions and institutional thinking was preventing him from seeing the situation clearly. Alexander, I'm going to ask you one final time. Will you support me in protecting Sophia from Victoria's harmful behavior? Alexander was quiet for a very long time, staring out the window at the palace grounds where his family had lived for generations. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with resignation. I cannot completely alienate Victoria. She's family. She's been through tremendous loss, and she does care about Sophia in her own way. But I can work with both of you to find an approach that meets everyone's needs. Elena felt something die inside her chest. Her husband, the man who had vowed to love and protect their family, was still prioritizing institutional harmony over their daughter's well-being. Then, I suppose we have nothing more to discuss, Elena said quietly. Elena, please don't make this an ultimatum. We can work through this if you're willing to be flexible. Elena looked at Alexander, seeing him clearly for what he was. A good man who had been so thoroughly shaped by a system that valued stability over justice that he could no longer distinguish between the two. It was never an ultimatum, Alexander. It was simply a choice. And you've made it. As Elena left their sitting room, she realized that her marriage, as she had understood it, was over. Alexander would continue to prioritize the complex web of family obligations and institutional requirements that defined his world, while Elena would do whatever was necessary to protect their daughter. The war for Sophia's well-being was about to escalate dramatically, and Elena was now fighting it alone. But, as she thought about her daughter's tearful questions and diminished confidence, Elena knew that she would rather stand alone in defense of her child than compromise with those who would sacrifice Sophia's happiness for their own comfort. The gilded cage that had once seemed like a fairy tale was now revealed as the prison it had always been. But Elena was no longer interested in being a captive princess waiting for someone else to rescue her daughter. She was ready to break down the walls herself, regardless of what the destruction might cost her.